Good news coming out of Wisconsin as this week House Speaker Paul Ryan announced he was not seeking re-election. And the thing is he's not alone. So far, at least 43 House Republicans have either announced out of scandal that they're resigning or that they're retiring because they probably see the writing on the wall or attempting a run for another office. Republicans have controlled the House since 2011 and, in my opinion, really honestly and truthfully have accomplished absolutely nothing positive for working people. And yes, I know we got $40. Who could not be happy with that? This year, 2018, this November could be the year, the time that Democrats take back the House, putting some checks in the checks and balances. Republicans have done what they said they were going to do. They've rammed through their ideological priorities. Tax cuts for the very wealthy, deregulations for big corporations, and oh, let's not forget, kicking the poor and downtrodden at every opportunity. Democrats need to just pick up 24 seats in November to retake the majority. And I'm joined by someone who I'd really like to see fill one of those seats, and that's Brian Flynn. He's a small businessman, a labor activist, and candidate in New York's 19th Congressional District. He's running against Republican incumbent John Faso, who you may know voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act and, of course, replace it with the GOP's Pay or Die plan. Brian, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick. Appreciate it. And also, my opponent, John Faso, is actually famous for trying to undermine unions as well. So in addition to trying to take away people's health care and give money away to wealthy shareholders, he's also explicitly been going after unions for years.
Again, another one of those unwritten Republican rules. And I have no idea when it turned to when the Republican Party was so anti-worker. But here's the thing, Brian. 2016 Republicans ran on their concern for working people. They ran on policies that they said were going to help. And yet all we've seen, from destroying the ACA to massive tax cuts for the very wealthy, is, well, having working people looking around. So there's an opportunity for Democrats to capitalize.
Definitely. And the way we talk about it, because it's hard to tell people they were wrong for voting for Donald Trump or for John Faso. What we've been saying is that they've been betrayed. They said they were going to not take away their health care. They did. They said they were actually going to give tax cuts to the middle class, and they gave them to the wealthy. And when I'm out there talking to people, the idea of betrayal, especially betrayal of working people, has worked. And as you and I have discussed, betrayal is the only truth that sticks.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I said this, right at the beginning and all through 2016. Trump and the Republicans ran on labor's message. They ran on trade policies. They ran on a working class that's been left behind. They ran on communities who've had their identities destroyed through bad trade deals. And now I don't believe they were ever going to do anything to fix that. But the working people of this country, for a moment, bought it.
Yeah, they did. And I hope you're right. And it's a classic populist mechanism, right? They go out and tell people, especially people who are in despair, who've been decimated, unions and working people have been decimated by automation and artificial intelligence. And they went out and said, hey, we're going to save you. And people got attracted to that. And it's the populist playbook. And I think what we have to do is to say, hey, listen, and approach it with a little humility. Say, listen, we haven't done enough, and we're here to help.
And this is where, the battles of the past, because I argue right now, we're in the middle of the next industrial revolution type moment, the tech revolution, which major changes are coming. And the idea that government cannot solve any problems or cannot help, which is the Republican view, is, I think, very dangerous going forward, especially in this time of massive changes.
I'm glad you said that. And if this has happened before, when you look at the change from the agricultural economy to industrial economy in the 1890s, it was not good for the workers. Those are the people who suffered the most, and some of the worst conditions in American history happened to working people in the 1890s. We're at a similar point today where you've got this concentration of wealth, you've got this complete disruption of the workforce. It is the responsibility. I can't think of anything more important for government to do right now than to figure out how to get working people back to work and getting not just decent jobs, but decent wages. And the way we also talk about it, Rick, is we talk about the fact that you have to remove the barriers as well that have been keeping people down. So it's about jobs, it's about wages, but it's also about barriers, including barriers that prevent people from organizing under unions.
At the end of this, we hear an awful lot about, education and job training and all of this stuff. And yet, you look across this country, Brian, and there are teachers in the streets striking because You've had under Republican control a lot of governors who have just slashed funding for education. And it seems that there's this belief, and it's a fundamental difference, I think, between Democrats and Republicans, is that if you give all the money to the folks at the very top, it will at some point trickle down to the rest of us. That hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure they're going to keep trying. And then there's the other side of this where you have to have this groundswell up. And I think, that message has to be one of those things that's run on this November.
I'm glad you used the term groundswell, and it's almost like the intellectual bankruptcy of the Republican idea of trickle down, which, by the way, has been proven by facts. And I know facts aren't what they used to be. They're now disputed. But if you look at it historically, the only way you're going to grow this economy, and you've talked about this a lot, is get money out of capital and into the hands of labor. We have a consumer-based economy, and the reason why trade unions are so important, and the reason why we have to get more money into the hands of workers, if we want to grow this economy, we have to actually get people to have decent wages, because they're the ones who spend money and have the multiplier effect.
Exactly. Well, let me ask you this: as a small businessman, what would you rather have, tax cuts, or would you rather have customers? I mean, because that's the fundamental question of what you're getting at.
I know, and it's almost like, it happened in the 1920s. You had the rich people gathering up all the money and holding on tight. Well, that didn't end well. And that's what led to the Great Depression. And what you're seeing now, whether it's the hedge fund guys or the guys in the fossil fuel industries, you have this tremendous desire to gather up all the wealth. It's almost as if I want to give them all economics 101 again. We have to actually do the opposite. We have to get the engine going again. And the only way to do that is not giving money away to shareholders. I mean, this one's great. Let's say roughly $1 trillion of the $1.4 trillion tax cut, of the Trump tax cut, went to shareholders. A third of shareholders are foreigners. So we borrowed $300 billion roughly and gave it away to sheiks and oligarchs. How is that going to help generate jobs in our communities, especially if you look at small towns and rural communities? Those are the ones who we've lost and have gotten hit the hardest, especially where I'm running in New York's 19th Congressional District.
And let's not forget, when that happens, when communities don't just lose jobs, but lose their identity. And look, we did a labor history tour a couple of years ago where we went into places where I look at, Akron, Ohio was the rubber capital of the world. Toledo, Ohio was the glass capital. Corning, New York was a glass capital. And all of those places have lost those jobs, and it was part of their identity. And what we've seen is a massive opioid addiction crisis just gripped this country. And I argue that's a huge part of it.
It is. And it's funny. Those are directly correlated. When you've got despair, that often leads to addiction. And also what we've done is made the problem worse by making addiction a criminal justice issue rather than being a health issue. And that's actually exacerbating the problem. And one of the things that we Democrats used to lead on is the need for criminal justice reform, and its role in actually getting the economy going again is actually rehabilitating people so they can become productive members of society again, rather than using private prisons as a way of imprisoning people, because that has a direct effect on the American worker.
Yeah, rather than retribution and profit. Let's not forget the profit part. So
Yep.
let me ask you, as a representative from the 19th district there, once you get to Congress, how do we begin changing some of these things? What's your number one priority?
It's what workforce, and you started with it. Workforce redevelopment is the top priority. It needs to be. How do we do training and retraining for the jobs that exist today? I'm a small business owner, and I operate medical device manufacturing plants. And what's interesting about that is that we've got jobs that we couldn't fill in that middle skill level. And what we have throughout the country, there are 2 million jobs today, people in those middle skill jobs that people aren't trained for. So if we can train and retrain people for those jobs, that's going to have a big effect. The other thing we have to do, and you mentioned it early on, if we do Medicare for all, that creates jobs. People don't realize the Affordable Care Act created 500,000 jobs, and it does it in our communities. And I think we have to realize, so for me, it's workforce development and Medicare for all, the two top priorities. And I believe, here's the great irony, I believe we can actually get Republican partners when it comes to Medicare for all. Business people do not want to be in the business of trying to manage healthcare costs and doing the employer-based healthcare solution. They don't want to do it. It doesn't make any sense to them either. Let's find the coalition that can come together and do Medicare for all, because it's actually going to cost less for all of us, give more coverage, and actually increase health outcomes.
See, from a business perspective, I've asked that question a million times. Why would you want to be a benefits administrator? Most people get into business to make widgets or whatnots,
right,
or whatever it is their passion is. They don't want to be dealing with insurance companies and benefit companies. They want to do their business. And I've often wondered why the business community isn't the one leading this push to get that burden off of their backs.
Thank you so much. It seems like you and I might be the only two who get this, because I have people give me a blank stare when I say that. They go, "Oh, really? Don't other countries have employer-based health care?" I said, no other country has it. And I understand the origins of it was in the 1940s when you had wage caps. But, we've kind of gone beyond the 1940s, and it's completely inefficient. It's a corrupt system. It's a monopolistic system, and it doesn't work. That's the most important point. It doesn't work. And there's just a few special interests that keep us from making it happen. And I think we can break through, because to your point, you have it as a business person, I can walk in and say, really? You want to be a benefits administrator? They're like, no, I hate it. Okay, then let's change this.
No, I mean, that's the way we need to be going. And a lot of this seems like common sense. And and I talk about this often on our radio program, that there used to be an era of common sense where there was some common ground where, Democrats, Republicans, independents, whatever, everyone kind of took some things as, just this is how it should be. And I look at Social Security, I look at Medicare, I look at some of our social safety net, that this most recent, batch of Republican ideologues, all of that's on the table. All of that's open for destruction. And I got to be honest, the chaos that I see coming because of the end of our social safety net, if they get their way, quite troubling.
It is, and my opponent's already talking about this. About a week after he came away from supporting. Now, he didn't vote as soon as he knew his vote was safe. He cynically did not vote for the Trump tax cut, but he did speak out in support of it. So we're going to hold him account for it, and it is his party that voted for it. And the interesting thing is that they don't realize that the effect that's going to have, and what he said, which is great, he said, you know what, with this deficit that keeps rising, which, by the way, they just chose to increase again, this deficit is going to require us to look at entitlement reform, which, of course, I call earned benefits, not entitlements. And they're already talking about it. So I think Social Security, retirement security, protecting current Medicare are going to be issues that we're going to be able to win on in this election.
No, I hope so. And look, I've made the argument that we should be expanding Social Security, because I don't know if you've noticed, but in my generation, in the 45, 55 range, no defined benefits for folks for my age and younger. So that safety net that my grandparents had, that three-legged stool that my grandparents had of a defined benefit pension plan, Social Security, and some savings, is really just one leg that they want to beat us with. So,
yeah, there's no savings, and they definitely don't have the defined benefit as well. You're right, and it's interesting. I've been advocating for universal pensions. It's starting when you're 18 years old. A little bit of money comes out of your pocket, a little bit of money comes out of your employer, and you start at that age, because we have to do that. We're the only developed society that has no plan for retirements, and you and I agree the 401k industry has been a complete giveaway to the financial services industry. And oh, by the way, it hasn't worked, because it's just one leg, and it's a one corrupt leg of the three-legged stool that you're talking about.
Well, absolutely. And, the thing is Brian, you've talked about Medicare for all. You're now talking about universal pensions. Someone's going to hit you with you're a socialist stick.
Yeah, right. Now, the reason why it's not gonna work is I am a free market capitalist as well. I'm a small business owner. Yes, I'm a union member. My campaign staff is unionized. Only the fifth campaign staff in the country, and the first in New York State to be unionized. And I've created union jobs. But I also believe in the power of capitalism and commercialism to help grow the economy. But it cannot be unregulated, and it's got to be working in concert with government programs that are trying to do what's best for society. And that used to be how it worked. It would actually work together. And here's the other thing. Everything that I've said, and everything I've said, are winning issues in the general election. And it's really interesting. People say to me, well, how are you going to win with those things? These are economic populist issues that resonate with working people.
No, I keep saying the Democrats have to come back to the New Deal era, kitchen table economic issues, how we're going to make your life better. For too long, the Republicans have masterfully, and you got to give Republicans credit, they've masterfully saddled Democrats with a whole bunch of really divisive social issues that have really pitted the working class against one another. Because look, there are some conservative working class folks who some social issues are a bit too far. For me, it comes back to what you put on the table, the roof over your kid's head, the clothing on their back, the future that you have for your family. Those are the issues that I want people running on.
Exactly, and that, I've defined my plan, my entire campaign's about the American worker, and it's about jobs and wages, but removing those barriers. But here's the deal: you can't have economic justice without social justice, and you cannot have social justice without economic justice. There used to be two things that we as Democrats realized and brought together, and we as Americans realized. And I think right now that's the opportunity for us, is to actually really seize the mantle of economic justice. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we do anything less on social justice. They can work together, and they have to.
It's interesting you bring that up. Just not too long ago, we observed the 50th anniversary of the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King. And you have an interesting bloodline. Your great uncle was the founder of the Transportation Workers Union, TWU, who, through that period in our history when King was talking about social justice and economic justice, your great uncle was right there with him.
Yeah, in fact, Mike Quill, my great uncle, was the first person to give Dr. King a platform. He invited him to speak at the Transport Workers Union in 1961. It was the first time he'd given a major speech, and because Quill understood the importance of connecting racial justice with social justice and economic justice, he actually believed that segregation was a scourge on America, partly because coming from Ireland, where being Catholic, you were discriminated against explicitly. And you were, in fact, under the oppression of the British Empire. So when he came here, he said, wait a second, I came to America because it's the place of freedom. And it was unbelievably important to him, to Quill. Now, if you look at what King was doing, he got the Civil Rights Act passed, and he got the Voting Rights Act passed, and he was working very closely with unions and the labor movement to achieve economic justice. And in fact, when he did the I Have a Dream speech, that March on Washington was a march on Washington for jobs and freedom. I mean, look at that. Even his entire purpose for that speech was around the idea of economic justice.
Yeah, I mean, I think his statement was something along the lines, if you can't afford the hamburger, what's the right? What good is the right to sit at the counter?
Yeah, exactly right. It is in his third leg to his stool, if you remember, was militarism. And it's amazing how that's so important today. The words of Dr. King and what he fought for is exactly what we need as Democrats, and what we used to be fighting for. And I think you said it well. We used to be the party of the American worker, and I think we have to just get back to those issues. And they don't negate any of our social issues. In fact, we have to integrate them.
I'm right there with you. It just seems like history keeps repeating itself, and the lessons of the past we seem to need to keep relearning over and over again, which is why I think it's so important to have folks like you running for office. And I wish you nothing but the best. Brian, I appreciate the time, and good luck to you.
Rick, thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing. You're an inspiration.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. If you want to check out Brian's website, brianflynn.us. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can take a look at it and take a look at his issues and the campaign. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.